Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, from depending upon which time zone you're at. Welcome you to today's webinar on unlocking the future of water resources and infrastructure. I'm David Totman, Innovize Thought Leadership Strategy at Autodesk, and with me today I have Tommy Holmes from the American Waterworks Association and our very own Carolina Venegas Martinez. She's in our water industry strategy. I think we have a very interesting topic this morning and would like to, let's go ahead and get started. We do have some updates. We kind of had a packed agenda and just kind of some of the end of year activities and some other issues that have caused speakers to have been unable to attend. We have a reduced set of speakers. We have, of course, Carolina and Tommy. We will have some Q&A as well, but just to let you know, then we do have a little bit more of an abbreviated agenda, allows you to kind of focus on the day's events. Some of the housekeeping. We're definitely encourage you to use the Q&A pane to enter some questions. We'll be looking for questions throughout. That we'll have a session at the end. This webinar is being recorded, so you will have access to that, and we'll make that recording available to all who have registered. You'll get a link in your email. So pretty standard issue webinar stuff these days. So let's go ahead and kind of jump into this. I kind of wanted to set the stage, right? Because we're going to talk about the IIJA and kind of what digital technologies mean and even policy statements. But prior to the IIJA, kind of one of the most interesting kind of marketing events, if you will, about infrastructure or the conversation, has been the American Society of Civil Engineers put out a infrastructure report card, and we've actually made some improvements. But the last report card in 2021, Dave gave a holistic grade of a C-, and for those of us in the water industry, a C- for drinking water, D+ for wastewater, and also like to talk about and have people remember that stormwater is in this picture as well. All of our grades, though, they need some improvement. And in the discussion, there was nearly $6 trillion in infrastructure needs, right, to kind of relieve some of our aging infrastructure. Very much so. We have been funding infrastructure for many years. There's about 3.35 trillion that was in the funding, but this left basically a $2.5 trillion gap over the next decade of working with infrastructure. So it's the classic more need than funding. And the IIJA really, responded unprecedented, funding response in bringing about 1.2 trillion to all of our nation's infrastructure. But there's still a gap. So we're thrilled to death to have this unprecedented investment. It increases the conversation, but also want to just remind folks that we have to be even more diligent, right? Because we do have a gap that exists. And so therefore bringing, optimized technologies to the forefront to work with our infrastructure is even more precedented, because everyone's going to think, well, we had this huge, infusion of money into our infrastructure. Why isn't everything perfect? Well, that just, causes us to be a little more diligent and again, applying, smarter methods as we rehabilitate our nation's infrastructure. So just kind of wanted to set the stage of this is an unprecedented, history-making investment in our infrastructure. We are ready for the challenge, and our next two speakers are going to talk about what this, what this means to us and how do we, how can we best respond? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carolina, and why don't you share your screen and get started. I believe you're muted, Carolina.
Okay, what about
There
now?
you go.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Thanks, David. And thank you everyone for attending this webinar today. As David said, I'm the Senior Strategy Manager for the water industry at Autodesk. And it's a pleasure for me to be talking to you today about what we can do to be able to deliver and operate better, sustainable, and more resilient water systems. Because most people take water for granted, but our infrastructure is complex, is aging, and no matter what other stressors we have, water utilities need to continue delivering a safe and reliable service. So there is a lot that we can do to help. We were completely disrupted during and after the pandemic. We've seen demand like never before. The way that we work is completely different now, and the adoption of digitization or digital technologies has been accelerated at an incredible rate. Across AC in general, buildings and infrastructure globally, we've been also seeing some important environmental trends. We know that construction, building, and infrastructure is responsible for at least 40% of our global greenhouse emissions. And what that means is there is a need of a bold action to reduce energy and carbon. And we're seeing more businesses around the world, including water utilities, setting sustainability targets and commitments for a net zero race. There are also more regulations growing for embodied carbon calculations, so we need to act. The capital and operational cost is also driving resource efficiency, and water is not an exception for that. Water scarcity is on the rise. Water conservation can be improved through our global water infrastructure. There is also growing demand to reduce raw materials and waste, especially in construction. So there are many, many ways that we can help and do. We need to be more creative and innovative and see how we can support more circular economies. And also, we're seeing a lot of those 100-year storm events happening. The climate is changing, and there is a growing demand to de-risk and design more sustainable and durable buildings and infrastructure, including smart adaptation of our built environment so that it can face climate resiliency. So climate change is an increased pressure, and that is and will continue redefining our built environment. And in our industry, in the water industry in specific, we're highly impacted because there is insufficient water. There is not enough water on one hand, but on the other hand, we may have a lot of water, like water in excess. And the impact of those events have been measured. There are huge numbers, and we need to do something. But how is the response of our water systems? And as David showed when he started and kicked off the webinar, based on the status or the grade that was given by the ASCE last year, well, we need to worry. So the struggle to meet the expected, and more than expected, the legally required service levels for water distribution, sanitation, flood control, stormwater management, not only haven't changed in a decade, they continue to grow. But as many as you know, COVID-19 has been the catalyzer of the decade. It not only accelerated investment in infrastructure projects, which will help with economic recovery, but it also pressed the industry to embrace technology. In fact, a year ago or so, there were reports indicating that about 60% of utilities worldwide will undergo some level of digital transformation by 2025. So as investments in water infrastructure are increasing to support the build of resilient water systems, there is a huge and strong opportunity for small and large organizations across the country to invest in technology to maximize those investments, but making sure that the right assets are going to be in the ground, in the right areas, so we can continue as an industry delivering exceptional quality to the community. So COVID was that wake-up call to many industries, including our industry. We're seeing for the first time in a very long time, almost historically, a lot of opportunity with funding. We have the American Rescue Plan, we have the IIJA plan, which is our main topic today, and the recent announcement of the Reduction Inflation Act here with that also is going to bring some money for drought management in the country. So there are all of them. There are a generational opportunity to invest in long overdue water projects and help us close that gap that we know we have. The big problem is that rebuilding, retrofitting, or even building new assets that comply with the evolving legislation and the complexities and the complex dynamic that we see in the cities is growing as well. Many utilities are willing to pursue some of that funding because they've been craving that for years, but they are not quite sure how to do it, how to go after it. So how can we help? We know that to face the challenges of the future, of tomorrow, we need technology and innovation. And we have known that for a very long time. But what has been happening is that all the benefits of the technology and innovation that has been invested in the design and construction phases of a project have not been really reaped. Because at least like 95% of the data goes unused after the construction is done, right? But there are also a shift, and we're seeing more owners using more designed build models. And in that way, the owners and operators now want to drive better decisions, but those decisions that they want to drive are based on data. And we are seeing that more and more in the water industry. And here is the latest couple of stats from the latest report of the status of the water industry. So here in the US, it was reported that COVID impacted 66% of the utilities' daily operations, meaning remote work for professionals, remote operations, automation, monitoring, even customer engagement. Utilities are also collecting incredible amount of data. Not all of that data is structured or organized. At least 46% reported that it's been organized and used for informed decision. But also they said that the most value use for data and technology is in asset optimization, it's in asset management, followed by smart operations or testing new processes in digital settings for expansions or upgrades. So this is very encouraging because the old ways of thinking and operating are finally conceding. Slowly, we're getting there, but there is a big opportunity to what is new, what's possible with the help of technology. And in fact, the 2021 report from the International Data Corporation indicates that the global spending on digital transformation, meaning business practices, products and organizations, like everything, will double to $2.8 trillion by 2025. That is more than double that amount allocated in 2020. And more companies in every single sector are learning and embracing and leveraging artificial intelligence, the cloud, the IoT elements to improve their business and operating models. And what we mean by technology and innovations starts with BIM. And BIM, as you know, is the backbone of the digital transformation. It's a process based on intelligent models and enabled by a cloud platform that are changing how infrastructure is planned, designed, built, and managed. And what we mean by that is BIM enables our customers to create that digital thread and have a track of that digital thread of rich data that is created along the different phases of the asset lifecycle in a connected data experience and allows and facilitate the development of the digital twin. It will empower more collaboration, decision-making, and at the end, better outcomes and transparency for all the stakeholders. And in that way, we can all transform the built environment, but in a very structured way, in a connected way, because by automating workflows, connecting teams, converging technologies, we can empower the industry with tools that help deliver a high-value digital twin, which will help us create and have access to smarter, more resilient, and more sustainable water systems to support future generations. So our customers who are designing, building, and managing all this critical infrastructure for water are looking for ways to access information about the asset and the built and the natural environment to improve visualization, analysis, operation, planning. All of those use cases require the intersection of CAD, BIM, GIS, data in all ways, evolving technology that is critical in shaping the future of water in a positive way that improves the life of everyone, our customers, greater community, our shared environment. And today, we have the best-in-class water portfolio in the market with solutions that cover all phases of the life cycle, from planning through operations, and all assets that are part of the water cycle. What that means is portfolio that captures the water value chain from cloud to sea. And with our technology, we're equipping teams to help build resilient communities and protect the environment, because as water projects increase in complexity and scope, more areas of expertise, multiple engineers, disciplines, different approaches are put together, each contributing to a very specific solution. And in a similar fashion, we need to equip utilities with technology to support their operational decision-making. The industry needs technology where data is efficiently shared, there is version control, there is one single source of truth, there is easy conflict resolution, there are fast results that are easy to obtain and follow to facilitate a truly collaborative approach in a technical workspace. And technology has improved incredibly in the last years, right? The compute capability only is been fantastic. So harnessing this efficiently and using technology in the proper way can unlock and help realize a lot of efficiencies and can reduce the negative environmental impact that our infrastructure also sometimes cause. So we, Autodesk and the AC industry, we're the AC industry partner for digital transformation. We have the most integrated portfolio, the most complete portfolio of modeling software for design and engineering. We empower our customers to realize better ways of working for better outcomes for the industry, for the environment, for their business. Our advanced modeling and simulation, design and operational solutions we offer to project managers, planners, directors, operators, modelers, C-level executives. We offer an opportunity to improve their planning and management of those critical assets by reducing the time they spend in the project with fast simulation, with one single source of truth, reliable results, so there is less rework required, more collaboration, work group management, all of that is moved and supported in a cloud platform. And I'm not going to talk about our solutions. I just want to show you what our customers, from engineering firms to utilities, are doing with them. And I want to start with this one. We all know that the Glen Canyon Dam provides like life-sustaining water and power to the western part of the country. But a half century of service, aging, water flow fluctuations caused by extreme weather have taken their toll. The Bureau of Reclamation made the decision to assess the dam's condition and protect it for generations to come. And they use reality capture and 3D modeling in Revit to do so. In this project, the Reclamation Bureau showed how new technology can help preserve a critical piece of infrastructure all over the world. And a piece of infrastructure that had all its engineering data in paper, in 2D drawings, and it was digitally scanned to create 3D models with data that offers depth and context beyond what any 2D drawing could provide. Plus, digital data is dynamic, so the models could be updated, new scenarios can be simulated, all those changes can be measured against the original data, and they could make it easier to find, diagnose, and repair current damage, but also predict and prevent future changes. So it's a multi-use model where it can be also used to educate the public with video walkthroughs and things like that. But more importantly, the model became a critical tool to prepare for the uncertainties of the future. In this one, a partnership between Scottish Canals, Glasgow City Council, and Scottish Water delivered a 17 million pound project to increase the canal capacity in the north part of Glasgow in about 55,000 cubic meters of flood water. That's equivalent to about 22 Olympic swimming pools. So Scottish Canals, Glasgow Council, Scottish Water look for an innovative solution and engage AECOM and Innovize to develop a smart canal that was equipped with a control system developed by AECOM that uses remote sensors and rainfall forecast that is fed then into InfoWorks ICM and ICM Live. Logs that are used along the canal can maintain the certain levels of water, which allows like an ecological flow with navigation. So pleasure boats can be there at any time, canal users. But when a storm is forecasted, they use automatic control sluice valves to manage those levels in the canal. So this is advanced technology being used to regulate an amount of storage capacity that is available and is optimized for better operations, and it's all used in real time. This is combining 21 centuries technology with a 250-year-old canal. And it's driving a lot of impact, recovering an incredible significant area for retail, housing, touristic areas in the north part of Glasgow. A little bit more on the modeling part, the DeKalb County in Georgia that has a population of over 700,000 inhabitants decided to adopt a new approach to manage rainfall. And one of the key reasons was that while the majority of the US states face yearly water shortage, they have way more than everybody else, has about 40% more rainfall than others. So their approach was to use a groundwater infiltration model in InfoWorks ICM, was developed by Jacobs, and they calibrated the wet weather flows in the county's collection system and to have a complete view of the rainfall potential, unseen leaks, and even how illegal hookups would affect their system. Now they can focus on the inflow and infiltration problems instead of everything else. So they can refocus their resources, and they are now able to keep up with increasing groundwater and really focus their resources on the ionite reduction, the remediation program, and better prevent sanitary sewer overflows. When we talk about water quality, we recall the water crisis in Flint, or the recent one in Jackson, Mississippi. And in this case, what I want to highlight is the rapid response to prevent a major crisis and how it was managed by Bristol Water in the UK. So in 2018, in January of 2018, as part of their routine monitoring, Bristol Water engineers identified a sample that contained small traces of Christoporidium. That is an oral pathogen very tolerant to chlorine, and it can be difficult to eliminate. So once the operator knew about the finding, they shut down the whole facility. They chose to supply water from a different treatment works while they were trying to do something. What was the action? What was the plan? The amount of water that was needed to flush out the entire system was huge, and they knew that they needed to significantly increase the supply of fresh water for that part of the system. But the question that the network asset model engineer had was how much water, how fast they could move water through the system while maintaining the integrity of the system, because the strength, the intensity are always good for cleaning, but too much, it can be maybe a bad thing if we don't have a very robust hydraulic simulation model to understand the effects beforehand. So they use InfoWorks WS Pro to calculate how many people were impacted and much more quickly fresh water they could move through the system to find the best solution for service restoration. They were able to minimize the response time. They were able to resolve the incident in a timely fashion. But that approach, the transparency, the quickness that they have with their users, with the community, got them 70% of customer satisfaction for the management of that potential crisis. I have a couple more. Just give me here. I don't know how I'm in time. I think that I'm fine in time, but I think that are really, really important examples to show in different scales. In this one, for example, Seattle Public Utilities, the public agency for Seattle in Washington State, it provides water, sewer, drainage services for about 1.3 million people in King County. SPU had a really strong goal in mind, to be more proactive than reactive in the risk assessment strategy: pipe inspection, condition evaluation, risk assessment, capital investment, implementation planning. They wanted to develop and secure funding for a long-term rehabilitation plan for their aging sewer system, but using innovative asset management software. So they had a lot of older pipes. They wanted to look at their network holistically and increase those rehab efforts. So they implemented our solutions. SPU was able to view the problem and strategize solutions for immediate concerns. They created a plan for a long-term rehab program. And with that risk-based prioritization of asset renewal and replacement, they were able to understand the risk in the system, and they were able to concentrate their efforts to avoid future pipe failure. In this one, that is also a very recent one in the city of Toledo in Ohio, when a treatment plant built in the 40s and in the 50s. This facility, is a treatment plant facility, needed more capacity to handle contamination because in 2014, I believe, they had a problem with algae bloom, and there was they had this do not drink advisory, and it started there. The county decided to engage with Arcadis to improve and upgrade the design and the overseeing of the construction of 2 new water basins, adding 40 million gallons of capacity per day, while coordinating all the different upgrades of the system, but keeping the facility working during the construction. The timeline was super aggressive. There were 2 years of design work starting in 2016. The construction began in 2018, and the 2 new water basins were up and running, or should be up and running, before summer 2020. What they didn't know, nobody knew, there was a global pandemic in the horizon. But Arcadis was able to embrace the cloud technology and use all the digital solutions that they had access to. They were able to integrate and bring together a range of disciplines in designers, contractors, team members spread out from Ohio to Florida with no data or time lost. They were able to better manage the project, deliver a better project from start to finish. They save about like 1,000 hours in design, and they were able to overcome even a global pandemic. They know that there is no other way to go back to things that are not cloud technologies. And the win, as the project manager of the project said, the winners here are the residents of Toledo who now have a water treatment facility that they can count on. And finally, the other thing is, well, sometimes demonstrating the ROI is always a hard task, but the answer is data. In this example here, Wellington Water commissioned Stantec to improve the pump maintenance and service plan of their 259 pump stations, and they tried and used Info360 Insight as part of a solution. And as we always say, and here, it is better to be proactive to reactive, but it is much better to do it based on data-driven insights. Sometimes leaks in the water network or in the systems can be threaten the efficiency when we have like stormwater inflows and infiltrations. And sometimes the proactive approach is to maintain and monitor the assets, in this case pumps, just because sometimes we do it during the routine monitoring activities, when we hear a noise, a vibration, or when it's planned just because of maintenance, not because of prioritization. So in this case, the project team tried Info360 Insight to help Wellington Water to develop a preventive asset maintenance program so they could maximize all the data that they have to better understand their operational performance. And by using their own data, clean and structured and organized, the utility now can have a much better control over the results and be more transparent and being able to justify capital investments. With this proposed plan, Wellington Water estimated to have a saving of about 20% in the electricity cost, plus additional savings associated with doing maintenance only when was needed, with the reduction of field testing and other things. So it also improved their operational resiliency. So to close, the example that I show you, from BIM to cloud collaboration, simulation, innovation technologies being used to renovate aging pipes, treatment plants, wastewater networks, sewer networks, and create a cleaner and more sustainable water systems. Digital water, or the digital solutions in water, offer clear benefits, and many water utilities are embracing a digital transformation towards more technology, big data solutions, so they can advance in the way that they manage their systems. We are seeing historical investment. We all, cities, local governments, the industry in general, we need to work together to do better and improve the critical systems that get water out to our homes, to our businesses. And water is life. And by developing and delivering technology that helps solve the challenges that we face today, we can improve the life of millions people around the world and build a better future for the generations to come. So I'm personally excited about the opportunities that we have to create a more digitalized and more sustainable water industry. We have the opportunity to embrace technology to go further and mitigate increasing water risks and create a more water secure future. And I think it's the time for the industry to drive change. So thank you very much for your attention. Happy to take any questions if there are any during the Q&A. And I'm now happy to hand it over to Tommy, who is going to talk us about how the AIJA impacts you. So Tommy, the stage is yours.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That was interesting stuff. And I wanted to thank Autodesk for inviting AWWA to be a part of this webinar. Well, I'm going to talk about how the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act affects us all. Hopefully all Americans eventually, because there's a lot of money going towards a lot of the nation's water infrastructure. I'm going to hit three main topics today. What's in the bill, and a major component of that bill is Build America, Buy America, and then some challenges and concerns that we see in the implementation of all of this. And some of these are significant. So what is in the bill? Now, the IIJA, it seems to have about three different names. It's also called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. If you talk to EPA staff, they'll call it bill. And if you have to look up, if you're a law student and need to look up the text, it's HR 3684 in the 117th Congress. So that's how you find it. So what's in the law? The law addresses a number of infrastructures across the country, but water is the big one, and it's the one we care about. And the water section itself is divided into two different parts. There's an authorization section and an appropriations section. And if you remember from high school civics class, authorizing legislation either creates a new program and sets its parameters and its goals and its budget, or it extends the life of an existing program. That's called reauthorization. Appropriations is when Congress shows you the money. That is the act of not physically, but moving the money out from the Treasury out to where it's intended to go. So appropriations is really key here. So what is in appropriations? Well, a big part of that is $15 billion for the removal of lead service lines. Now, AWWA a few years ago, just a few short years ago, commissioned a study to see just what are the nation's needs for removing lead service lines. And we came up, our contractor, not us, came up with a figure of at least $60 billion to remove all lines affected by the revised lead and copper rule. That includes galvanized pipe downstream from a lead pipe. And that's very conservative. So 15 billion toward a $60 billion need. I'm not going to be ungrateful for $15 billion. So we say this is a very nice down payment that Congress provided for removing the nation's lead service lines. Now, this is being channeled through the state revolving loan fund, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit more as we go along. However, unlike the traditional SRF, as we call it, there's no state match required and no cost share requirements. 49% of the funds provided here can be given out as grants or loans with principal forgiveness. And just think of that as maybe a grant with less paperwork, but it's about the same thing. Now, what's good is these funds can be used for a variety of activities, for example, for identifying where your lead service lines are and then planning the project to remove them, then the actual removal of the lines. Now, Congress did not send $15 billion down the pipe all at once. It's coming out in increments of $3 billion annually over 5 years. And remember, the infrastructure law is a 5-year bill, and that's going to come into play in a few minutes as well. But it is a 5-year bill funding. All right, I've lost control. There we go. More appropriations. $11.7 billion in new money for the drinking water SRF. And the wastewater SRF got a comparable amount. There's two SRF programs, one for drinking water, one for wastewater. Technically, the wastewater one is called the Clean Water SRF. I try not to use that because to lay people, clean water could sound like drinking water. Anyway, wastewater FRF and drinking water SRF. Now, in this new money, 49% again can be used as grants or loans with principal forgiveness. And in the first 2 years, states only have to put up a 10% match. The traditional SRF requires a 20% match by states. Then there's an additional $1.26 billion a year for 5 years for the drinking water SRF. Historically, in recent years, we've been getting about 1.126 billion. So this is a nice little bump. And then 50 million annually for the WIFIA program. That's one near and dear to our hearts at AWWA. We led the efforts to get this enacted into law. That doesn't sound like much on the surface, but the way WIFIA works, every dollar appropriated by Congress results in about $100 being available in loan funds. And that's another class altogether and how that occurs. But that is a tremendous amount of money and a bang for the taxpayer's buck. There was one administrative change to WIFIA in the infrastructure law. Previously, you had to get 2 credit ratings when you were applying for a WIFIA loan. Now you only need 1. So that was a nice addition. There's even, but wait, there's more. There is $4 billion to address emerging contaminants via the SRF again, and PFAS are per and polyfluoroalkyl alkyl substances was specifically mentioned as a target for these funds. And again, these are loans with principal forgiveness or grants, no match, no cost share requirements. And then another $5 billion to address emerging contaminants in disadvantaged communities, again, with no match or cost share requirements. Now, these are the authors. I'm not going to read all these bullets to you, but there were a number of programs or existing programs that got authorized funds, but they didn't get the actual funds. So, you know, if we care about these, we need to focus some of our future lobbying efforts on getting appropriations for these authorizations. And yeah, that's going to require a little more legwork on our part altogether. Now, there's one special authorization I wanted to draw attention to here, and it is not directly an infrastructure authorization, but in the long term, it has an effect. There's been a lot of concern about the ability of low-income customers to pay their water bills. There are existing programs to help people with their energy bills, but we haven't had a national program for water. And so there's been intense interest on the Hill and in other places off the Hill on creating such a program. Now, what came out of the bipartisan infrastructure law was a compromise, political compromise. There were advocates for low-income folks that wanted immediate assistance now, much like we got in the 2 years ago in the bill for pandemic relief. However, up on the Hill, congressional staff didn't feel like it understood exactly what was needed. For example, how do you deal with renters who don't directly pay a water bill, but the landlord pays the water bill? They were trying to figure out how to handle that. So a compromise was struck. In order to get some funding out immediately, they authorized 40 pilot projects to be run through EPA. And there's 8 for rural systems, 8 for medium size systems, 8 for large systems, and 8 for larger systems, and 8 for systems specifically serving the disadvantaged. That money was not appropriated, so that's on hold. Also, a study was authorized, nationwide study of the needs of low-income water customers and how they could best be served. and that hasn't come about. And it's probably not going to be in the omnibus budget bill that comes out in the next couple of weeks. And events may supersede this. There is interest in creating a permanent program. So this may fall by the wayside. It may get funding, but it may fall by the wayside if a permanent program is eventually created in the next Congress. Now, I've been making references to the state revolving loan fund programs. Why the SRF? Well, think how long it might take to set up a whole new federal program for administering all these funds. So what Congress did is they've done in several instances in the past, they looked to the SRF because there is already an administrative infrastructure, so to speak, in place for soliciting applications, evaluating applications, selecting applicants, and then eventually for distributing funds. And as I said, this will be much quicker than standing up a new federal program. It's not a perfect system, but it is faster. And if you're familiar, you may or may not be familiar with the SRF. It is administered actually at the state level. And I'll explain that a little bit more. How does the SRF work? Most of you here probably know this already, but there's always, in these seminars, there's always a substantial number of people who are not very familiar with the SRF. So I'll very quickly go over how that runs. Typically, every year, Congress provides appropriations for the SRF, and it comes via one of the 12 annual appropriations bills that Congress has to pass, or a big omnibus bill, which we've seen lately. Funding for these programs comes in the legislation that funds the Environmental Protection Agency, which comes through a bill that's usually titled something like FY 2023 Appropriations for Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies. That's where you'll find EPA's budget, and that's where you find the funds for these infrastructure programs. Now, how do they distribute the SRF? Every 4 years, at least on the drinking water side, every 4 years, EPA conducts a needs survey. And we encourage our members to answer the needs survey because it has, in the long term, it has an effect on how much money your state gets out of the SRF. On the wastewater side, there is a Byzantine formula that was created back in 1986. There's talk of revising and updating that. Just how to do that so no state loses money is the big challenge. But on the drinking water side, it's based on a needs survey. Then EPA looks at that needs survey and allocates money among the states based on that, with every state getting a minimum percentage. I think it's 1%. Every state gets a minimum amount from the SRF, even if they historically don't use it. I know there's one state out west that hardly uses the SRF at all until now because they use mineral rights to fund their water infrastructure projects. Anyway, the latest needs survey by EPA did request more information about lead service lines, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Now, this is a lot of new money here. EPA issued implementation guidance last March 8th. And there's some pretty good stuff in there. I've read through it. It addresses lead service line replacement and gives examples of projects that would be eligible for funding under this. It describes what an emerging contaminant is, and whether you disagree or agree, it's pretty good it's good to have that on paper for discussion with the agency. It describes disadvantaged communities and encourages states to streamline the SRF process. It doesn't mandate it, but it encourages. It'd be nice. Every state is different, so it's hard to mandate how it should be streamlined in your state. It urges the states to encourage integrated regional approaches for water systems. We all know there are a whole lot of water systems in the United States, and a good number of them probably should, if not consolidated, form some kind of partnership, whether it's bulk purchases of supplies, or sharing managerial and technical expertise. but we do know there's some need for partnerships amongst all the thousands of water systems out there. Now, I get a lot of questions in these seminars about Build America, Buy America. So I wanted to address that here. And I will tell you, I do not have all the answers to all your specific questions, but I'll try to give you a broader understanding of what it is. Now, we've been living under American iron and steel requirements for about a decade. So the difference here is American iron and steel still is in effect, but Build America, Buy America extends domestic content requirements to manufactured goods and construction materials. So how do you define whether it's a domestically sourced product or material? Well, EPA says, or Congress said, actually, don't blame EPA on everything on EPA. Congress mandated that this is figured out by saying the cost of the components in the end, the final product, the value of the final product, 55% of it must come from domestic sources. There are waiver processes. And I thought what was interesting in this latest iteration of domestic content requirements, it said the product, you can get a waiver if the product in question is not available in sufficient quantities or of satisfactory quality. It didn't say excellent or great quality, it said satisfactory quality. I thought that was an interesting choice of a word. So we'll see how that shakes out. But there are waiver processes there. I'm not saying they're easy, but they're there. Now, the White House Office of Management and Budget did issue its own guidance last April. And then the various agencies that are, implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law were tasked with developing their own guidance. Well, EPA released its own guidance for Build America, Buy America in November, and you can find it on EPA's website. I've downloaded a copy onto my computer, but it is relatively easy to find, as easy things to find on a federal website. EPA has already issued a number of broad waivers. There's a de minimis waiver for small parts. There's a waiver for what they call small projects. That is an infrastructure project receiving less than $250,000 in federal assistance. And then there's a waiver for WIFIA and SRF supported projects that began the design planning process before May 14th. May 14th is when Build America, Buy America took effect. Now, the definition of began design planning process, you need to enter into a dialogue with your state SRF agencies or federal officials who are administering the WIFIA program to get a precise definition of that. But I think in the end, common sense should prevail there. Now, I wanted to briefly go into some challenges we see in implementation, things we're watching. With all this money, there is just a tremendous new workload on EPA and the state agencies and those officials at EPA and at the states who handle the SRF in particular. In response to this, some states, and I know EPA, have ramped up their hiring for SRF staff. And there's a number of demands. This law did also reinstitute the Superfund tax. So they have to have staff on hand to administer that and monitor that. And as a matter of fact, about 2 weeks ago, the EPA's Office of Inspector General issued its annual report on concerns or things to watch in EPA administration of its various programs. And one of the 8 programs highlighted was the implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law and managing all this spending. So, EPA's Inspector General is watching how they roll this out. Another concern that we want to put in people's minds is with the core SRF funds, states have to provide a 20% matching fund. And I've made reference to this earlier, but you got to remember that this requires an appropriations by state legislatures. So that can incur a time delay for things happening. So if you're concerned about your state having all of its SRF money that it's entitled to, you probably want to start talking to your state legislatures. And I also talked about earlier how on the drinking water side, money is allocated according to the latest needs survey. And the last needs survey talked about lead service line, or asked questions about lead service lines. The problem is these SRF funds are going to be allocated according to the needs survey, and the needs survey looks at all infrastructure. So money dedicated to lead service line replacement, it may not be allocated exactly according to the needs on the state level. However, there is an existing process within the SRF program for reallocating unused funds. It's a little time consuming. You have to go through the next fiscal year's budget cycle, but there is a way to reallocate funds. But in this first go around, we may see some states get more money than they know what to do with, and some states not getting near enough money. But that is, something to watch. Now, disadvantaged communities, I mentioned this briefly a few minutes ago. The definition of a disadvantaged community is determined at the state level. So consequently, we may have a lot of variation of the definition of a disadvantaged community among the states. And remember what I said, in the implementation guidance that EPA issued, states were urged to update and refine those definitions. And that's another workload on state agencies, but it's something that's probably needed. And a concern we've had with the way EPA looks at affordability and disadvantaged communities, they tend to use median household income, and that is really inaccurate in some instances, especially when you have a larger metropolitan area that may have pockets of poverty. That may throw off the MHI. So we want states, when they update their definition of a disadvantaged community, to take that into consideration, not look so much at MHI and a whole metropolitan area, but look out for those pockets of poverty within a city that may overall be fairly well off. Earmarks. This is a big one. In fact, we've got a letter to Congress probably going out next week on this. Congress brought back earmarks in 2021. They don't officially call it that. It's called congressionally directed spending, but it's still the same thing. The process itself is more transparent, but it's still an earmark. Our concern is that earmarks are coming out of SRF appropriations. Now, in most states, that's not a major problem now, but the IIJA is a 5-year bill. So our concern is what happens after fiscal year 2026. If these earmarks are still coming out of annual SRF allocations, that could really cripple the program. And another concern is these earmarked projects may or may not be in the state's SRF intended use plan. When every year the states have to draw up a list, prioritize the projects under application and drop in intended use plan. And these projects that are in the intended use plan have gone through an evaluation and assessment of their ability to repay a loan. If it's going to be a loan, repay the loan. Could this project be done a better way? So the earmarked projects may or may not have gone through this assessment. And I'm not saying all these earmarked projects are bad or unworthy. It's some may be, some may not be, you know, some may be, some should be funded and some maybe need to go a little more evaluation. But this is a concern we're about to raise to Congress, mainly in the interest of future fiscal years. And I want to point you all to some information. On the AWWA website, we do have a nice web page dedicated to implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And this is the simplest way. The URL address is really complicated. So I put, these are the drop-down menu target that you go to for that, to find that. And EPA, I have to take my hat off to EPA. Some stuff is real hard to find on their website, but some stuff is real easy. And they do have a web page dedicated to the infrastructure law, and they have a web page dedicated to Build America, Buy America. It may not have all your answers, but it is a good place to start. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and open things up to the moderator.
All righty, thanks, Tommy, for that. Yeah, I just wanted a couple of kind of closing comments and wrapping some of this up. You know, Tommy took us through, you know, some complex information from the funding perspective, and that's kind of the interesting thing, you know, we find ourselves in as we navigating, you know, technology, but also policy, right? Because of the attachments to funding. And a comment about the funding, yeah, the EPA has great resources. You know, you should go check this out. That, you know, that the allocation, it's already out there, right? All the states have gotten their allocation, but they have some really good tools that you can drill down, even interactive maps that you can kind of see, you know, per state what some of those allocations are. And so, you know, kind of what all does this mean? I think it behooves you to definitely find out whatever state you're in. If you work for you know, large consulting firms, you know, you're in many states, but know your state's allocation. I think Tommy had mentioned formulas back to 1986. I almost said 1886, but you know, the formulas have been tried and true, kind of, but are a bit outdated, right? And so I think there's some interest in trying to refresh that. You know, these needs assessments, the needs surveys that Tommy talked about. You know, some use, some don't, and we are talking about, you know, holistic infrastructure when it comes to the entire infrastructure bill. Definitely, there's allocations, you know, from the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act. Basically, yes, we have funding now for quantity and quality. Many of our conversations in infrastructure tend to focus around quantity, but one thing that we are involved with quite a bit, and Carolina mentioned, you know, case studies on dealing with quality as well, right? And there's a lot of research in the community going into PFAS. Definitely the lead service lines, Tommy had covered that, brings us into a set of asset management that we may not be used to as say utilities, as owner operators, that, you know, we've owned the main in the street, we've owned the stub up to the property line, but this includes those service lines, right, that actually go into the home. So we're starting to see a lot of more you know, communication, collaboration between homeowners and utilities, and what all that means for the lead service line replacement. And that really gets me into, you know, a kind of a holistic right-of-way rehabilitation efforts, right? We should be kind of focused on not just replacing that one said lead service line or that one sewer main or that one, say, gas main, or paving that one road. It's how can we start to bring together kind of holistic right-of-way rehabilitation when it comes to these. Now, the fundings is allocated. You can't mix and match some of the funding, I think, but as we get into our digital technologies with unprecedented collaboration efforts, I think we have some opportunity there. Tommy did bring up kind of the disadvantaged communities. Look to the Innovyze Autodesk websites. We have actually several webinars on how you can use digital technology to bring authoritative data into that conversation. As Tommy said, the definition is kind of left to state and local definitions. There are definitely authoritative data sets out there. The White House has the Justice 40 program, which the polygons are available via GIS layers. The CDC has a social vulnerability index. It's used in public health, but can also be used in understanding where we might, do infrastructure rehabilitation. And the United Way has their ALICE index. So there's lots of different authoritative data sets that can help you kind of get into this almost an objective prioritization of infrastructure projects. And the more and more we start talking about this digital transformation, this move to cloud technologies, the power of what we can do, with IoT and with real-time sensors and cloud-based solutions. One of the things that I like to engage when I get into these conversations, while being a water guy, I have to bring the digital divide topic up as well, as that cloud is fantastic, but if I can't get to it, it's hard to use. And so as water professionals, we should also be talking about, the telecommunication aspects for rural America. How do we get them, the access they can provide as well? Again, kind of thinking in that holistic standpoint. So, there was a phrase that was used. I love what Tommy said about, the infrastructure bill's been called several things. Another kind of phrase that went with all that was, the Build Back Better kind of mantra that the bill was supporting. And I support definitely Build Back Better with digital transformation. And we should not be building back the same, right? I think there's a tendency that the SRF, here's all this money. Hey, I have, we used to call them shovel-ready projects. I got these old projects, dust them off the bookshelf and let's apply and go build that one, project we wanted. We need to be smarter. We need to refresh those. The criteria has changed. The technologies have changed. So I think this is an opportunity again for us to, not do what we've always done before. Let's be a little more creative, a little more innovative, and truly build back better. And so I think with that, we are going into a set of Q&A, of which we have a couple of questions here that have come in. And I will go ahead. I think we'll start off, Carolina, for you. So you can take yourself off mute there. There was a really good question came in early, kind of really talking about, I think, the owner-operator aspect. While the question, I won't read the whole question there, but it, when you're talking about BIM and the delivery process, they're really kind of starting to talk about, well, BIM's fantastic to deliver. Now I have the as-built. What about going into post-construction, right, for the owner-operator? Do they actually have the tools? And is a digital twin actually useful post-construction? How maybe you want to comment about the use of digital twins, and I have some thoughts I'll let you answer. But capital versus O&M, and is just to build the project, or can I take it into a real-time state? Some comments about that?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. It's a question that we get very often, and it's because when, like, in the years past, we talk about the life cycle of the project, and the life cycle of a project sometimes for the engineering firms is they design, they build, and they deliver. But the owner who owns the asset for decades is involved in the planning, conceptually the project, and they operate the asset for a very long time. So the asset and the project has like two different kind of like life cycles that connect. But at the end of the day, what we are seeing today, and we see like a lot of that investment is happening in technology, in BIM workflows, BIM solutions has been in the engineering, design, and construction phase. As the person who was asked the question said, the value, we see the value there, but the benefits of BIM is really reaped in the operations when that data is really pushed towards the end to the operations, because you have a BIM model, a 3D BIM model with rich in data that can be used during the operations, and that's what really defines that digital twin. A digital twin that has many different definitions. And that you type in Google digital twin and everything can go live right there, right? It's definitely, yes, a digital replica of the asset, but an important component that is where the owner says the value of that is it needs to be live, a dynamic digital twin where they can see real-time data, where they can see the flow, the pressure, the different components of their system and see how the system operates. Those two, it's the same digital twin, but let's say that they have two different layers. There is an asset twin that is the one that is built in the engineering and construction process with all the AC data that is put in, but then there is the operational data, the sensors, the SCADA data, the meteorological data, that helps in the operations. When those two, that's where the value of the owner is, and that's where we're going when we have a holistic view, a whole life cycle, not linear, like I deliver the project and that's it. It's really an infinite cycle or loop where things come together. Once you operate, they are maintaining and you replan, and that data will flow in all those different phases. So there is a lot in the owner space to learn and adopt, and that's where we see the big shift happening. The owners now know that data is the answer for those questions that they have. If you remember one of those stats that I showed for the state of the water industry report, it indicated that they are capturing a lot of data today. They don't know right now, or is vaguely how they are using it or structuring it. But they know that they can manage their asset properly and much better with that database. So that data is already built. Most of that data is already built in the design process. So that is already there. The investment in technology is already there. Now we're getting there into the operations, connecting those on structured, separate, disparate systems to really bring a general view of their system, their operations, their performance, and they can take advantage of that. That's where we'll see the 80% of the benefits of BIM in the operations when those two worlds get connected.
Yeah. Great points, Caroline. And I guess I would like to add to this, because it is kind of the question centers around the owner, right? How does the owner afford this? How does the owner have the skill sets? Do they have the time? Do they have the funding, to do this? And I think kind of a part of the answer to the question is, when we say digital twin, I think those of us in technology, we put titles on things, and I'm sure Tommy will attest to this. One of the main topics that is in the industry right now is sustainability. Well, we used to call that scenario planning, and so it's being prepared and making sure you're sustainable, right? We use different terms. To me, digital twin, it has always been. We've been doing digital twins for years, if not decades. When you look at it as, say, a system of systems approach. Many components can become part of the digital twin story. Your CMMS, your billing system, and that's why you've seen great advancements and lots of conversation from Autodesk on while we have been a traditional desktop product oriented company, we're moving into the cloud, into platforms, into APIs, right, to have this data collaboration to prepare for these systems of systems. And there is no one product SKU for a digital twin. There may not even be one vendor, may I dare say that, that because it is, it takes a system of systems approach to make these things work. So it is a bit daunting, and that's why we need to help owners understand that potentially they're well on their way already to digital twins. And there's lots of tools that can help them out. So I do think we need to kind of make sure that the term digital twin is not so scary. That they have embraced this with some of their existing systems, and it's up to us to make it a little bit easier to understand and make it affordable and actually present the value, right? Because Tommy has talked about it, Carolina talked about, there's definitely more need than funding, and the only way we're going to do this is really, I think, with some of these digital technologies. So kind of switching gears a little bit, Tommy, I believe this one's for you. The discussion about multiple funding sources. So a project has multiple funding sources. Which I guess the specific question, what comes out last, similar to like a WIA funding, is there such thing as maybe you can speak a little bit about last out funding, if that makes sense to you? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was trying to prevent background noise. I think I get it. I understand, projects may have multiple sources of funding. The way the SRF works, when you're approved for an SRF loan, the state doesn't put a big chunk of money in your bank account. What happens is money is set aside in an account for you at the state level, and you invoice that as costs occur. Now, as to which funding source is drawn upon first, that would be something you would negotiate with the state SRF officials as you go through the loan approval process. So I'm sorry, I can't be more specific than that, but it's you don't get a big chunk of money all at once from an SRF loan.
Yeah. I think I have a kind of a general question, especially potentially for our audience tuning in, and Carolina, feel free to jump in, and Tommy, so definitely the funding is targeted for infrastructure owners, right? Because we're investing in infrastructure, in things that help rebuild a community. But if I'm, say, a consultant, what's my role in all of this? How do I bridge the gap between policy and technology and owner operators? Any maybe some comments or advice to our folks that are consultants that, again, are kind of just navigating this whole arena? Tommy, maybe you first.
Sure. I think there's going to be a big need, or is a big need, for particularly the small to medium size to medium large systems to help navigate all this and get all their background information lined up to apply for a loan. A very large utility will have managerial and financial expertise on staff, but a lot of the medium size on down to the small systems will probably need a lot of hand holding and getting their application ready for an SRF loan or certain type of grant. It's pretty complicated, some of this stuff, if you've never done it before. I think one reason we like the WIFIA program so much is the staff there. They're very easy to talk to, and you can initiate a call with WIFIA staff just to learn more about the program. And in fact, you can start a kind of pre-application process for WIFIA at no cost. They're very easy to talk to. But yeah, the SRF is a little more complicated because it's run at the state level, and there's 50 different state agencies running it 50 different ways. So yeah, consultants have a big role to play, especially with utilities that don't have the in-house managerial and financial expertise. I was at a meeting of water utility managers a few years ago, and two managers who run the same size utility side by side were talking about finance, and one said, "I'm AAA rated. Why should I bother with the SRF? I can go to the bond market in 30 days and have my money." And a manager of the same size utility sitting next to him said, "Look, I know it's a real pain in the neck to apply for, through a federal program, but the money is so good, I make my finance people jump through all the hoops." So, it's really an individualized decision as to which source of funding you're going to seek.
Yeah, I think that's it's an interesting view, Tommy. And if we look at the landscape here in the US and the significant number of utilities that we have and the difference in sizes, and when we see it's a big opportunity for the underserved to get the funding because they haven't had those opportunities, but they don't have the resources in-house to get them. So there is definitely a lot of handholding and education and support from the consulting firms to get there. I think is looking at not like, of course, it's the use of technology to do better projects and all of that, but it's mostly, for me, it's most look at that as a service to the community and really help them get the level of service that they need and the communities deserve. So I think that we can help as well is education, is supporting them in services and how they can achieve those or reach those resources that are available today, because I think that's the main concern. The utilities have been asking for that amount of funding. Funding has been always the big challenge. Now that we have that historic investment, how do they get them? The technology is out there. They don't have the people. How do they get there?
Yeah, and I'll just add, I've had conversations with managers of medium-sized utilities who have never taken out an SRF loan, and they say, "All right, where do I begin?" And I have to tell you, talk to your state agency. I'm sure they want to help. But yeah, a lot of people who have never applied for an SRF are now looking at it.
And it's an opportunity for the consulting firms as well to bring more business volume to them. It takes some time to build some educational pipeline there, get them, help them, handhold them, and then get those resources. They know they have the quality to deliver those projects, and the social value is incredible high. Doesn't have, it's unvaluable.
Yeah. Carolina, if only we had a button in Civil 3D that said, get approved funding. Design the project and get it paid for.
Oh my goodness, that would be so easy.
Don't think I'll see that for quite some time. So we're coming up on almost hour and a half here. So maybe we don't see any more questions in the queue. This has been a lot of fantastic content. Again, the recording will be made available. Any last minute comments? Tommy, anything final to say?
Well, I want to thank everyone for their membership in AWWA, of course, and and also, I know a lot of you, lobbied or contacted your members of Congress as we were looking at these funds, and I want to thank you for that. And we'll probably be calling on our membership to talk to Congress again in the coming year. We're going to have a number of challenges on not just infrastructure, but on a host of other issues, PFAS, cybersecurity, conservation programs in the Farm Bill that protect sources of water. So watch out for those legislative alerts, or just watch the news, and we appreciate your participation.
Yep. Carolina?
No, just thank the whole audience to joining us today for this webinar and spread the word. It's an incredible opportunity that we have ahead of us. It's a generational opportunity to do better on these long overdue projects in the water infrastructure. So the time is now. We can drive the change. The technology is there. the expertise is there. The owners, the water owners, the water utilities are shifting their mindset, and we can help there as well as a community. So we all work together for the same. We're all passionate about water. Water is life. Water is our passion, and let's work together as an industry to really drive change for the good.
Yeah. I definitely want to thank both of you for lots of great content. Carolina, I think, all eyes are upon us, right? I think the public is watching. We've always said we don't have sufficient funding. As I agree with Tommy, we appreciate the down payment, and we do need more. But I think for reestablishing public trust, $1.2 trillion, that's a lot of money, and so people are watching. I think we will make them proud. What we are doing over the next 5 years, I think we will be watched, and it will set the stage for the next 5 years after that, right? We know this is the infrastructure needs are not going away, so I think it's time for us to kind of do our due diligence and, like you say, restore that public trust. And digital methods are, I believe, the key to the future. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. And again, once the recording's made available, it'll be shipped out to everybody. And thank you for your time. And I think that wraps it up.